Well, now we have a surprise that I didn't know, or we didn't know that this is Daryl. He's a good friend of ours.
Hey,
Hey, or he just dropped by, and Daryl is a missionary kid, right? Second generation.
second generation, yes.
Second generation. Your kids are third
Third
generation.
generation.
Yeah, I mean I know someone who's like fifth generation, but you're like second generation missionary kid and was a missionary to Brazil. So Daryl, how are you?
I'm doing very good.
This is a sweet surprise.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah,
It's an,
well,
it's an honor.
yeah. And what, in a couple hours we will be all together in a
Yep, we will.
Friendsgiving. So if you're in the Tampa Bay area, we have a Friendsgiving party for missionaries and missionary kids. Just um, what do we do? How do we make them know that we're at in the Friendsgiving party address? So do
We'll have to
we?
post on the Facebook page.
Oh yeah, okay. So go to our Facebook page and you'll find out where it is. So Daryl, uh, now that you're here, I'm gonna pull you in for a minute.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming. How long have you been a? I'm sorry, I came out of the frame there. Okay. So tell me your story. I mean, real quickly. We only have a few minutes, but uh, where were you born and raised, and your experience as a missionary kid?
So I'm the second child. I was born in Vianópolis, Goiás, in Brazil. My parents were in training.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was picking up on the Portuguese, and my dad was teaching because he already had the Portuguese because he's a missionary kid.
Yeah.
And so that's where I was born. And then when we were 2 years old, we moved to up to Imperatriz,
Mm-hmm.
Maranhão, and we had to wait till I was about 4 to get permission to go into the work. And then from 4 years old until 20, roughly,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I was raised
Yeah.
with the Kinkachi Indians. And my parents worked there, and they still do work there up to now. And we come back to States every 5 years,
Yeah.
roughly, to visit supporters. And then I went to seminary and got married and had my kids, and yeah, so
And you became a
and I
missionary
became a
too.
missionary. Yeah.
Okay. What is the most challenging part to you of being a missionary kid? What would be the most challenging?
Challenging, I guess, being accepted,
Mm-hmm.
because growing up in Brazil, you're not accepted. In
Yeah.
the Indian tribe, you're not accepted because you're white. Um, in the Brazilian culture, you're not accepted also because you speak kind of funny
Mm-hmm.
and you're
Yeah.
you're an American. And then you come to the States and you're not really accepted because you're not from the United States. You don't know that
Right.
you don't live the American culture. You've got a weird culture, so it's kind of hard to be accepted, and you kind of
Yeah.
find your place. Where's your place? Where's your home?
Yeah.
So that was more of my challenge.
Yeah. It's really interesting that you said that, because I don't think a lot of the churches, a lot of missionary supporters,
Hmm.
right, donors and supporters, and even pastors realize the challenges that missionary kids go through,
Right.
So how did you cope with that challenge, or not cope? Let's be real here. Yeah.
Um, I guess really just try to get through it
Yeah.
because there really wasn't in my time there really wasn't that. Maybe there was help, but I didn't know about it.
Hmm.
So I just had to deal with it. Just suck it up and live with it.
Suck it up,
Yeah,
buttercup,
suck it
right?
up,
Yeah.
buttercup.
Yeah. So, um, uh, tell me about coming to the United States now as an adult with your whole family. How did that transition go?
So I've never really liked coming to the United States and really didn't want to come, but my children and my wife were dying to come to the States, so we prayed about it and we waited on the Lord, and finally He gave us the right moment. We came. It's been challenging.
Yeah.
I've been here in the States 3 or 4 times and know kind of how things are. The life here in the States is really because you got to work and
Yeah,
you've got,
different.
yeah, it's really
Yeah.
different. You got to work and you've got family, and so you got to juggle a lot of different things. And so my kids come in learning English. That was a
Hmm.
real challenging going to the school. The schools were different. The subjects for them were different. And then my wife, um, before I would always come home at certain times because I was a teacher, so they would see
Hmm.
me a lot. But now they don't see me as much, and so
Yeah.
it's been real
It's a different
challenging. It's a different,
lifestyle.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally different
So,
lifestyle.
that's the most interesting thing about missionary kids, right? Because you're American,
Hmm.
but yet, life in the United States is foreign for you guys,
Right.
right? But you're American. And so we call missionary kids a lot of times hidden immigrants,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
So uh, what would be we talked about the negative part. What would be the best part about being a missionary kid?
Wow. Best part, you get to know different customs, foods, you
Yeah,
travel all over the place, get to know lots of different people.
yeah.
So you experience a lot of different things. Like I had hunting and fishing and going out with the
Hmm.
Indians, bike riding and working in the gardens and playing soccer. And so yeah, it's going in the jungle. You can go into the jungle and go camping, and you don't need to. It's different here in the States. Here in the
Yeah,
States,
yeah,
it's kind
yeah,
of all planned. In
yeah.
Brazil, it's not.
Yeah,
You just
it's not what's better or worse,
no,
right?
it's
It's
not. But
just different.
it's a
Yeah,
different, yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
and then riding motorcycle, I was able you can go out into the do trails like with motorcycle and riding horses, and so it's like I don't know, it's just
Yeah.
free. I don't know, it's just
So if we got only a minute left, so or a couple minutes left, if you were there are missionary kids watching out there, and then there's missionary. I mentioned it earlier this morning about there the biggest challenge are missionary kids that are from your era, your generation, right? A lot of them were in boarding school and all that stuff, and there was nothing like this. There was
Mhm.
no, member care for missionary kids.
Right.
Now we have Interaction International, we have Mukapa, we have Barnabas Internationals, Concourse, right? So a lot of, and we have the MK Summit that Interaction International hosts, where you have, I think, 150 providers for missionary kids that are helping them, right?
Mhm.
So what would in right now, there's a lot of missionary kids, adult missionary kids, your
Mhm.
age and up to about 50, 60, that are struggling and suffering, and they don't know what's going on with them. So what would your advice be to your fellow missionary kids?
My advice would be to um if you're struggling in certain areas, I'm married to a monocultural.
Yeah.
So I'm as a TCK or an ATCK. Um, the marriage is sometimes it's really difficult to understand
Hmm.
each other.
Yeah.
So if in marriage having difficulties, or if you're struggling, if why do I act like this, or why do I behave this way? Um, yeah, it'd be good to reach out to get some, mental health coaching, get some counseling. Not because maybe there's an issue,
Hmm.
like something wrong, but just to understand why am I like this?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
going to the what's Brent's ministry?
Interaction
Interaction,
International.
yeah.
Yeah.
Going to that one, being part of Compass Ministries and being part of other ministries also. It's helped
Hmm.
me to understand why I behave a certain way or act a certain way or think a certain way. It's helped me understand a lot and helped me to understand other people also that didn't grow up that way. It's been really good,
Okay.
really good.
Yeah. Well,
So yeah, I challenge and put out the challenge to all the MKs and
yeah.
TCKs to yeah get some start reading on TCKs, understanding our life, how we had it, and maybe get some help. It'd be really good.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Well, this is a sweet surprise. I wasn't expecting this, and that is a big help. So, and it's just right on time because the next workshop is exploring the mysterious life of third culture kids by Carrie Ann Dressler, and everything that Darel. I mean, this is amazing because Darel actually just showed you guys what that life is about. And now we're going to go on to the workshop. And again, if you are an MK and or an ATCK, we are trying to destroy the stigma of mental health issues or disorders, or even just, just struggling. There
Yeah.
is no shame in admitting that we are struggling. And the more we come to terms with that and ask for help, the better our lives are going to be. Because the objective here is to thrive and to actually be free, be healed, be restored, and live the lives that God has called us. So without further ado, again, thank you,
You're
Darel.
very welcome.
We're going
Pleasure.
to pass you now to Carrie Ann Dressler.
Hello, welcome to the strange and mysterious life of TCKs. I'm so glad to be here with you today. My name is Carrie Ann Dressler. I am a counseling intern with Compass Ministries. I'm a full-time international worker with the Christian and Missionary Alliance. My husband Scott and I have served for 14 years in Palestine before we transitioned to Germany, where we've served for the last 6+ years. I've been teaching English and am now a counseling intern full-time at Black Forest Academy, which is an international boarding school that serves primarily missionary kids and other expat children from all over the globe. I have 5 children. You can see them in this photo, and one beautiful daughter-in-law. I'm originally from Pennsylvania, and that's where my 4 adult children now reside, along with my extended family. I joined Compass because I believe in their mission and their vision. I'm passionate about supporting and resourcing missionaries and their children, both those still living with them and their adult children. So why the title, Welcome to the Strange and Mysterious World of TCKs? You can see this cake in my slides. This is a funny story that has become sort of one of those family stories that just gets told over and over. It would have been, one of my kids would have been about 10, and they were reflecting on our return to the US for a period of time, and just thinking about how they didn't quite fit in and were worried and wondering and curious. And they basically said, it's such a strange and mysterious USA. And as they said that, it just became this family joke. My sister had it put on a cake. My mom had it put on a cake to welcome us, both at different times. And now it's something that we say often. And when I was thinking about the title for this workshop, I thought, oh, that's kind of funny, because it was a TCK who was trying to make sense of their life, and this idea that their life is different. And while I think it might be a bit mysterious to some of us, I don't think it's all that strange. So just so you have some background, my journey began in 2004 overseas. My husband Scott and I left for Palestine with, at the time, 3 small children. And that's where I immediately began advocating for the well-being of our missionary kids. It just felt like the obvious connection between the health and well-being and well-adjusted missionary children would lead to the health and well-being of their parents. And I think that was an important part of my journey early on. In 2017, we sent our oldest daughter, not our oldest child, our second born, to the boarding school in Germany, Black Forest Academy, where I now am teaching. And that was challenging. It was a challenging experience. It involved a lot of prayer, a lot of family discussion, making sure that it was the right choice before we made that decision. And it absolutely was the right choice. Our daughter Maggie thrived there. She had opportunities open up to her that she didn't have in Palestine, where she was attending school, or in homeschool. And so we knew we made the right decision. Unbeknownst to us, during that year, a job opportunity opened up for my husband to become a teams developer throughout the Europe and, at the time, Middle East region, with our organization. And our regional office was headquartered in Kandern, Germany, which is where Black Forest Academy was. And so Maggie spent a year there, and then we followed her, leaving Palestine in 2018, and heading to Germany. And it was while teaching at the school, that I really felt God prompting me. I would often walk with the parents of some of my students, our coworkers, through difficult and challenging times with their kids. And I would reach the end of the skills that I had as a minister, pastoral care, and I longed for more experience, more understanding, so that I could go further with them in their journey to health and well-being. And that was, something that I gave to God in those moments and said, what does that look like? And I prayed about it. And it was over the course of about 18 months that I just submitted that to God and, said, do with it what you will. And the January of 2022, I inquired at Crown College, which is affiliated with my denomination, on I believe January 4th, about their program, their online Master of Arts in Counseling. And by January 7th or 8th, I was registered for that semester and on my journey. And I'm delighted to report that I have finished all facets of my program. I'm simply waiting for graduation in December. And so that's how I find myself here with you today and volunteering with Compass. So it's important for us to ask the question, who are TCKs? I would like for you, as you're watching this, to stop and think about what you know about third culture kids. Do you know any personally? Have you engaged with any? Perhaps you're in ministry with them already, or you have supported missionary families and their kids. What have you learned about third culture kids as a demographic, as you have engaged with them, as you have learned about them, encountered maybe some stereotypes about them? What do you know about them, and what assumptions do you make? And a good question for us to ask is, are there assumptions that we make that we might get wrong about third culture kids? So I'd like to read the definition for third culture kids that is written by Pollock and Van Rinken. A third culture kid is a person who has spent a significant part of their developmental years outside the parent's culture. The TCK builds relationships to all of the cultures while not having full ownership in any one, though elements from each culture are assimilated into the TCK's lived experience. The sense of belonging is in relationship to others of similar background. So as we think about this group of children and also adult third culture kids, so we keep that TCK title, but we recognize that just because they turn 18 and become legal adults, that part of their identity, that cultural identity, doesn't end. I think for Compass especially, and for those of us in the clinical mental health side, we think about mental health concerns among third culture kids. And there are some unique concerns that they have that I'd love to share with you, for you to think about, maybe learn about, and ask some curious questions about. So I want to say at the outset that I am using a wonderful resource, highly recommend, Raising Up a Generation of Healthy Third Culture Kids by Lauren Wells. She is a prolific writer and advocate for third culture kids, and I highly recommend this book. So I have adapted some of her main talking points in her book for this presentation. I want to give her full credit and encourage you, if you have the opportunity, to get her book, especially if you plan to work with third culture kids. So, of course, on the screen, you can see the first area of mental health concerns for third culture kids is grief and loss. Third culture kids are guaranteed to experience a considerable amount of grief and loss during their developmental years. These losses compound and go unacknowledged. So, what does that look like? What are the grief and losses that third culture kids experience that many other kids their age don't experience? So the obvious is when they leave their home country. So no matter what age they are when they leave, there is grief and loss in that leaving. And while we often celebrate in the church the sending missionary families, and it is a beautiful partnership for those of us who send and those of us who go, recognizing God's call, we want to acknowledge the challenges and the losses and the grief that is part of that journey. And these children say goodbye to significant family members. They say goodbye to their friends. They say goodbye to what is familiar and what is home for them. And that is important for us to acknowledge and recognize that often goes unacknowledged for our third culture kids. And especially when they get overseas and they're around other third culture kids who all experience the same losses, the same grief, it feels like, well, I guess this is the normal thing. And maybe they don't pause to recognize those goodbyes as something really hard and challenging. There's continued loss and separation. Even the children who were born overseas lose that connection with grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, extended family and friends. And so that is an obvious loss. Frequently, family members back in their home country or their passport country will pass away or have major illnesses and sicknesses. And these kids are not able to participate in the grief processing in those events. Maybe they miss the funerals, or they miss the goodbyes, or they miss that journey of walking through hard things with their family members. They experience grief on the fields of a lot of transitions, people coming and going, and lots of goodbyes. And so these are just a small example of some of the griefs and losses that missionary kids and third culture kids have to face and deal with. Point 2 is trauma. TCKs also experience more trauma than the average person. They are more likely to be affected by complex trauma, extreme trauma, and often high exposure to traumatic situations. So this can be anything from traumas that they experience because of their new host culture and the cultural dynamics involved. Anything from struggling to enter a new school, not speaking the local language, being ostracized, being bullied. And I want to differentiate between small T trauma and big T traumas. Both exist in the lives of our TCKs, and they may affect each of these children at different levels. But so we have some cross-cultural traumas that they experience. Sometimes in their host countries, there's political upheaval, war, evacuations, and having raised several children in Palestine and Israel, I know that that's part of our family story, that we experienced a lot of violence. It was militarized. We had rifles pointed at my kids and had to go through military checkposts to move about. their friends suffered significant traumas, and my kids were affected by that. Closures, threats of evacuation. So these are all experiences that the third culture kids may have in their host countries. I'm not going to enumerate all of the potential traumas, but I just want you to think about how life might be different, and what kind of trauma third culture kids may experience or encounter because of their life overseas. So point number 3 is identity and belonging. This is a huge and important part of the life of TCKs. Most TCKs struggle with a lack of belonging. They don't feel that they fit completely in their passport countries, their host countries, and perhaps even in their immediate family. And I know when I read that last part in Lauren Wells' book, it really made me stop and think. There are some kids who feel so different from their parents, who feel so different from their siblings at times, that they don't know how they fit in their family of origin. And so this idea of identity and belonging is something that third culture kids will take with them all their life. And it will have varying levels of significance to them, but it is a part of who they are. And for those of us who are from a passport country, who have spent our developmental years in that country. So even for myself, where I've spent almost as many years overseas as I have in the US, I still feel a connection and an ability to assimilate in the US. I go home, and though things might feel a little culturally overwhelming, or things have changed and I may be a little out of it for a while, I still feel like I can assimilate and I can fit into that culture again. Third culture kids may hold that passport, and their parents may have talked about that country, and they maybe even spend a few months here, a year there in their passport country, and yet they feel like strangers. And for some of them, they don't want to go there. They don't want to be there. It's hard when their agency is taken away and they're forced to repatriate or be back in the US. Usually that happens for missionary kids around age 18. They can no longer hold a visa in their host country, which may actually feel more like home to them than their passport country. And so they're sort of forced, their hand is forced into this transition. And it's challenging. I think we can see how that be really hard as a third culture kid to not feel like you fit in anywhere. And, they'll talk about their host country being home, and then they'll also let you know, but also I didn't fit in there either. I was made to feel like I just didn't belong. So identity and belonging is a huge challenge for our third culture kids. Need for change. I think this is a surprising one for many of us. Feeling settled is often an uncomfortable feeling for third culture kids. Thus, many have a mental alarm clock that goes off every couple of years that urges them to start over with new people, new places, new things. This more commonly arises and causes difficulty in adulthood. So in my work with adult third culture kids, I have many, many clients that have experienced this unsettledness, this need for change. Oh, I've been here for 4 years. Time to cut the ties I've made and move on to something new. Or, ooh, I don't want to get stuck here. What if I get stuck here? These third culture kids really experience this unsettled feeling and almost like being caught or trapped. And they want to move on. So that's something that I think is unique to third culture kids. Obviously, there's others who experience that wanderlust or the desire to move on. But for TCKs, it is often part of their experience and, a result of all the frequent goodbyes, frequent transitions. And it sometimes prevents them from making good, close connections with people in healthy ways. And that leads us to these relationship struggles. Point number 5. So TCKs often struggle in adulthood to have deep, meaningful relationships. They're very good at the initial interaction and the beginning stages of a relationship. But once it gets beyond a certain point, they lose interest and move on to new sets of friendships. So this is connected to that desire to cut ties and connections and move on to the next thing. TCKs have a habit of going deep very quickly in their relationships. So they'll just meet someone and they are really ready to jump into the deep conversations. But once those initial connections are made, they often struggle to develop meaningful long-term relationships, and they'll move on quickly, or they'll feel insecurity. And so this is a struggle that we need to be aware of in working with third culture kids, helping them learn how to make connections that last a lifetime in some cases, helping them to invest and to be vulnerable and to receive love and connection from others. Point number 6, shame. Wells discusses the shame of the inability to fit in adulthood as intuitively as others, but there are many themes of shame that run through the TCK life. A significant source of shame is admitting they needed help or that they struggle with mental health or with their faith. They bear the heavy burden of not being the reason their parents must be sent home. So shame and all facets of it are often a theme for third culture kids. And I want to highlight this aspect of the pressure these kids feel to not be the reason mom and dad have to return to their home culture, to not be the reason that mom and dad's ministry fails. These are words of third culture kids. I can't let them know I'm struggling with my mental health. I can't let them know I feel sad all the time. I can't let them know about the abuse that I suffered, because what if that means we have to leave the field and then people don't hear about Jesus, or my parents have to give everything up because I can't keep it together? Can you imagine the heavy burden that is for our TCKs? These missionary kids who have been engaged and involved in their parents' ministry, who have felt the weight and importance of that, suddenly feeling like it will be their fault if mom and dad need to leave this work and this ministry and go home. I have heard that from many kids. I don't want my parents to know how hard this is for me, because they have an important ministry and I don't want to mess it up. That is a heavy, heavy burden for a child, too heavy a burden for a child to bear. And it is surprisingly a common theme that I hear. So the other is struggling with their faith and feeling like that could wreck mom and dad's ministry. They don't want to admit it. They have questions, doubts, anger at God, and no safe place to process that. That's something I want to create in my time of counseling with kids, a safe place where they can ask hard questions about their faith and be angry and frustrated and sad and hurt, and engage with their faith. It's always my desire that counseling with me will give them that safe space, but also keep them close to Jesus. So our missionary kids are often carrying a heavy burden that we are unaware of. And it would be great for more of us to be aware of that and to help them alleviate that burden, help them put it in proper perspective and get the help that they need to thrive. The aspect of fitting into adulthood. So this is really a time of struggle for missionary kids at college age. Like I said, frequently there's no agency. They must leave their host country because of visa issues. Every country that I've lived in, once my child turns 18 and graduates, they are no longer able to hold a long-term visa to stay in that country. And they must return to the US for us, since we're US passport holders. And so suddenly this child is, forced, as they often feel, to leave the place that's been home and return to a place that feels very strange and foreign to them, and to navigate this frequently with parents who are an ocean apart from them. So mom and dad remain on the field. Maybe they come home for a week or two, get them settled at college, hope they make good connections and have good extended family support. And then mom and dad return to the field, and this child who is now 18, I want you to stop and think about any 18-year-olds you know, your own children at this age, while they are emerging adults, they still need mom and dad. I remember being 18 and thinking I was so mature and still wanting to run home to my mom and dad or call them. I'm grateful now for the many ways that our kids can stay connected to their parents overseas. It's much easier now than it was even when I was in college. However, that ocean is a distance. And when these kids carrying this burden of shame struggle in some way, they often think, I don't want to bother my mom and dad. They're so far away. I don't want them to worry about me. And so they struggle often on their own, trying to make their way and find that it's not as easy as they hoped it would be. And they may look at their peers and judge themselves harshly, like, why is it so easy for my friends or my classmates to do these things or to know these things, and I'm really struggling. And so that's an aspect of shame that our TCKs have to handle. Toxic stress. Many of us in the TCK world refer to this phenomenon as expat child syndrome and use this term to explain the behavioral, emotional, and or physical challenges that many TCKs struggle with, particularly during periods of transition. So toxic stress is a challenge for our third culture kids. If you think about your sort of baseline, like a time when you're not stressed, and it could be, say this is your level of not stressed, and you experience some stress and that level rises, and then maybe a little more stress, and then your stress gets alleviated a bit. Problems get solved, anxiety goes down. Some TCKs experience stress and then more stress and then more stress and then more stress, and it gets alleviated a little bit so they feel better, whether it's the cross-cultural adjustment stress or any number of stressors that they're experiencing living in their host culture. So it's alleviated a little bit, but it's still not this baseline. They're still existing in stress. Well, guess what? When we exist for a long time in a stressed situation, that becomes our new normal. And that is toxic stress. That is stress that will affect our health, our mental health, our well-being. And many of our TCKs are existing at this level of stress. Their stress is never alleviated. Their anxiety is never alleviated fully. And so they're sort of existing in a situation where adding a little more stress may send them over the edge, may cause an explosion. And so I think that's, I like the idea of expat child syndrome, experiencing stress that doesn't happen to kids who grow up in one culture. So that leads us to just some questions I would like to ask you. I'd like you to think about, to reflect on. What are mental health concerns that you have seen or experienced with third culture kids? So if you think about any that you have engaged with, I had you kind of pop those people into your mind at the beginning of this workshop. Think about what you've observed and any of these mental health concerns that Lauren Wells enumerates here. Do they resonate with you and the TCKs that you know? Have you held any false or dismissive ideas about the TCK experience? That's something for you to reflect on. I think some TCKs have experienced folks back in the US dismissing their concerns or their anxieties, their worries about transitioning back to the US, and really saying, oh, it must be so great for you to be home. And my kids have always responded politely, yes, but inside they're thinking, yeah, this isn't home. I know you think it's home. For you, it's home, but for me, it really doesn't feel like home. And so I think sometimes people can be dismissive of the challenges that TCKs experience, their lived experience. What is one area about which you are interested to learn more? If there's one of these ideas that you were really intrigued by, it's something you can research. It's something I would love to talk to you about. I'm sure others at Compass would love to engage with you about. Of course, Lauren Wells' books are exceptional. David Pollock's book about third culture kids continues to be extremely useful. I think it was written like 30 years ago, but still super relevant. It's been updated. There are lots of resources out there for you to learn more. So if you've been intrigued by something that I've shared so far, be sure to make a note of that and follow up on that. So I just want to share some personal experiences of mine, in relation to what I've already shared with you, and maybe to make it a little more personal. So as I said, I've spent over 20 years living overseas, and we've had a month or a year in the States here and there, but for the most part, we've been living overseas. And part of my experience in learning about third culture kids, of course, has been observing my own children. And as I said, soon after landing overseas back in 2004, I really felt it was important for me to advocate for the health and well-being of my own children and the children of all my coworkers, and just thinking about the facets of life as a third culture kid and raising them. So what was challenging for my kids, and it's helpful that I have 5 kids because every child is different. Every child weathers stress and challenges differently. And I think, my children are a great example of that. Some experiences that we've walked through as a family have significantly affected one or two of my children, where the others seem to have processed it quite quickly and well, and don't return to that same experience in the same way. And so I've seen my kids struggle in lots of areas. I have acknowledged that education is a huge, huge issue for missionary kids. Some are fortunate to live in a location where there's a great international school or a local school that meets U.S. standards, that prepares our children to return to the U.S. Remember, we go into this knowing that our children at age 18 will need to return to our home country, our passport country. And so the educational choices and decisions that we make throughout their lives, and especially, late middle school, high school, need to prepare our kids for that return to the U.S., whether that be on for college, trade school, or the job market in the U.S. The choices we make have consequences, and we feel that deeply. And my children felt that. And, we did local schools for their early education. My children were fully immersed in Arabic, went to a local Palestinian Christian school. It was a De La Sallian Catholic school. And, in those early years, it helped them acquire the Arabic they needed. I always supplemented their education at home with just their English to make sure they stayed on grade level for English. But otherwise, we felt like those early years, the Palestinian school was meeting their academic needs. Our mission org sent an educator out to offer standardized testing for our children and made sure they were reaching grade level, and to find if there were any gaps. My children didn't have any significant learning disabilities, and so the Palestinian school worked for them in those early years. It worked for my oldest son all the way through. So he graduated from the College de Frères in Palestine in 2018. he was able to complete his entire education there and was fully prepared for life at university in the US. For my other children, the Arabic school became a challenge. We did have an extended time away, and that because of our youngest child's health concerns, and that meant a break in their Arabic language. And Arabic, if you know anything about Arabic, though it is a beautiful, wonderful language, it is a difficult language. And spending too much time away from the full immersion meant that it was challenging. And so when we returned in 2014 after being in the States for a period of time, we knew we had to make some changes, some decisions. And so we always met our kids mid-year and at the end of the year. Hey, is this too hard? Do you think you can make it through this school year? Do we need to make a change? And our younger son made that change first. We transitioned to homeschooling for his last few years in middle school and his freshman year. It wasn't ideal. He was isolated. There were concerns just socially for him. It sufficed, but it wasn't a permanent solution for him. Our oldest daughter, as I already mentioned, she ended up at boarding school. She went back to the Palestinian school, transitioned into their GCE program, which offers some English education. It just wasn't a good fit. Homeschooled for a year and then went to BFA for that year of boarding, and then graduated from BFA as a home student when we joined her there. So you can see lots of steps along the way to find the right fit for her and make sure her needs were being met. And so education is a challenge, and every one of those transitions was hard. I would love for my children to be able to share personally their experiences with you. But they have their own story to tell. And as a parent, I have wanted to facilitate that story and to hear that story, even if it's painful, to know how hard school and education was. So that's one area where third culture kids really struggle, and their parents struggle as well, trying to make the right choice. Cultural acquisition for some kids, especially if they go overseas for the first time in their preteens or early teens, language acquisition is a challenge. Kids who are homeschooled may not ever get to really integrate into a local church or the local culture. They may sort of exist kind of outside of that culture, and that presents challenges. I know my kids struggled to fit in, and being the only foreigner in their school, and just constantly standing out and not being fully integrated. That was hard for them. The goodbyes sometimes were gut-wrenching, I'll be honest. Watching your child weep as they say goodbye to their grandparents, watching the grandparents weep. Those are wounds that we carry and are significant. And I have felt that distance, and I've seen my kids struggle with those goodbyes. The revolving door of coworkers and their children. So my kids having to say goodbye to so many of their friends over the years, and just recognize that that's the life we live. People come and go, and we are constantly called upon to say goodbye. So those are some of just my observations of my own children. Obviously, I don't want to take up too much time talking about that, but I thought it might be helpful to have that perspective. Of course, sending a child to boarding school is a difficult decision that many missionary families make. And I'll be honest, there's been some not so kind things said to these families as they make this difficult decision. Having done it for a year and having labored over that decision and prayed over that decision and recognized it was the right choice for our daughter, I just know it's not a decision that's ever made lightly. We know the struggles that come with that, but we also know that with schools like Black Forest Academy, they're here to meet those needs, to partner with our missionary families, to care for their children well, and provide a quality education that prepares them for their next steps. So I know Maggie struggled with homesickness, and she struggled with fitting into this new environment and all the adjustments and questions. I guess I would ask you to think about, do you have any negative thoughts about boarding school? Do you have any, um, you know, stereotypes that you hold on to or judgments that you make for our TCKs and their families when boarding school is a choice? Yeah, just for you to reflect on that question. Common themes I see among TCKs that I work with. I think we've covered quite a few of them. I really see that belonging piece, that not fitting in, the stress about having to go back to their passport country, not being sure that they really want to do that. Um, Anxiety and depression are common themes in my clinical experience with third culture kids at varying degrees. Of course, my practice at BFA, we've had children with suicidal ideation. We've seen children with eating disorders, anxiety, depression, panic attacks, nightmare disorders, and just trauma that we've been helping them process. So these are some common themes that I've seen in my clinical practice. And I know that some of my kids have experienced some of these things as well. And so there are significant mental health needs, and we want to love and care for our TCKs well, and make sure that they know they have our support, and to just love them with the love of Jesus when we do this. So adult TCKs are often overlooked, an overlooked demographic when discussing care for missionaries, expats, and their families. Once children graduate from high school and return to their passport country, they're frequently cut off from services available to them while overseas. That's something we need to think about, and I think a lot of mission orgs are starting to consider and do better. Whether they attend university or begin working, they often struggle to fit in. Many feel stuck or trapped into a decision they did not wish to make. They often express negativity towards their passport country and a desire to not live there. They may feel like they are being kicked out of the country that feels more like home to them. Imagine that. This connection you have to a people and a place, and suddenly you're told you can't be here anymore. This transition often shines a spotlight on the otherness that they feel, emphasizing that they do not belong in any place. It may also feel like their agency has been taken away. And at this time of significant upheaval for them, they lose access to the services provided by their parents' mission organization. It is in the college and young adult years where many traumas suffered in the past resurface. So things that they've been able to suppress, not think about, just keep stuffed inside, often bubble up and resurface in these young adult years. And for some TCKs, that doesn't happen until they're in their 30s and 40s and 50s and beyond. And so I am so grateful for Compass offering services to adult TCKs of any age, recognizing that they may never have processed this life that they've lived. Cultural adaptation can be a struggle as these adult TCKs try to fit in with their peers in a place they may never have spent more than a few fleeting summer vacations in. Skills necessary for living independently may have been missed, or they may have been unnecessary in their upbringing. So they weren't taught. It wasn't something significant in their host country. And this leaves many adult TCKs feeling more stressed and unprepared. So I think I just have such a heart for this age group. And, part of that is now I have 4 children in this age group. But I just always have felt that we need to continue offering them services. We need to be aware that they have unique struggles, and we want to be there to support them. So I thought it would be an interesting way for me to end by sharing something very personal. So my daughter Maggie, she recently graduated from Penn State University with her master's degree in creative writing. And while she was there, she focused on nonfiction writing, a memoir style of writing where she reflected on her childhood, her life as a TCK, her upbringing. And she had a wonderful experience where she received a grant to return to Palestine. I was able to go with her as part of that trip to revisit as an adult the places that were significant to her as a child. It was a perfect trip. So many wonderful connections with our beloved Palestinian friends, the ability to go back and see all of our old homes, our old church, just to reconnect with that land and those people in a significant way. And that was part of Maggie's journey in writing her reflections. So she was published in a journal, a literary journal, and she's again being promoted. Some of her writing is being shared again through this master's program that she was part of, and I'm so proud of her. I know it was challenging thinking about some of these issues I've just shared with you that TCKs struggle with. Maggie going back into her childhood and reliving some of those difficulties and processing that was really hard for her. A lot of the time, it was emotionally draining, and yet she's created such beautiful things that I think should be shared with the world. I know I'm just her mom talking, but I believe she's done some really beautiful writing and reflection. And so I'd like to share an excerpt. I asked her what excerpt from one of her pieces that she thought would be good for me to share with you all. And it comes from her piece titled "Like We Belong Nowhere." It feels lonely in that minivan. The only other entity inside is the creature made of the questions about my identity that have been with me for almost my entire life, growing and developing as I did until I sit here as an adult. They sit beside me, not as a person, but just as real, a being formed from questions, confusion, tears of rage and broken sadness, hopelessness, loss, gathered over the course of my existence until they too are the size and shape of a full-grown adult. When I reach out to touch them, to hold the hand of the being that's been my companion for over 18 years of life, I can't. Questions are ultimately just questions, doubts just doubts, fear just fear, loss and grief just loss and grief. So even though these things are so real and so powerful that I can see them in everything I do, they will never be tangible. So they'll just be here, unable to be fully embraced. Every feeling of identitylessness, every pain, whether piercing or numbing or throbbing or dull, everyone is all here next to me because they had to go somewhere, and that somewhere is apparently with me all the time. They sit there across from me, staring at me as I look through the windows at the war raging around me. So I'm grateful that Maggie gave me permission to share that. I hope that it touched you in some way and maybe helped you connect from her real life lived description with some of the things that I've shared today. I love TCKs. I love what I'm doing with Compass. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I hope that this workshop helped you understand TCKs a little better. I hope that it maybe ignited some desire in you to work with this demographic or to potentially learn more about them. And like I said, please avail yourself to the resources that I've mentioned. I would be delighted to be in contact with you if you have questions or would just like to engage with me in some way. And so as I end this time, I send you off with my best wishes for a wonderful holiday season. And I hope that this was beneficial. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carrie Ann. What an amazing day. What an amazing conference. I hope you all learned from all the workshops and gathered some tools for yourselves and for the people that you're ministering to. But most of all, I do hope that you had um, developed an appreciation for mental health and faith. Um, as Christians, the Lord has given us um, uh, tools to be able to be a light unto this world. And the things that were talked about today, um, building resilience, um, um, mental health as a tool for faith instead of uh, uh, something that is an obstacle of faith, um, emotionally healthy spirituality. All these things are tools for us to thrive. And God created us with a brain and a spirit. And it's both. We can be intelligent and we can be spiritual. So I want to encourage you all to if these are recorded on Facebook and you can see it in our website and rewatch it again. Let's all take the stigma of mental health issues and disorders, uh, remove them, take them out of our communities and look at people who are struggling, who are broken with compassion, and be able to use all the tools that God has given us: medical, spiritual, pastoral, um, and, science, all of that. Some people have been asking me, especially after Carrie Ann, just people in the past have asked me so many times, and it's just appropriate now that after Carrie Ann did her workshop, why do it? Why send missionaries out? If it's so much of trauma, challenging, and all these things that transpire with their kids, why go? Well, all I can say is it's Second Corinthians chapter 5, verse 14. For Christ's love compels us, because we are convinced that one died for all, and therefore all died. It's Christ's love that compels us to do the things that we do. And you don't have to go overseas. Even here, there's a crossroads that we get to every day in our lives. Are we going to be a light unto this world, or are we going to keep it to ourselves, keep the light to ourselves, and mind our own business? But God compels us, and we go forth. We give out the message of the gospel because He saved us, because He rescued us, and we want to share this to a broken world. So when people ask, why send missionaries out? For this reason, because we were once broken and God saved us, rescued us, healed us, and restored us, that we can't keep that to ourselves. And God compels us. The love of God, the love for others compels us to do this. So I want to thank you all for being with us. I want to thank all the presenters of our workshop for, they didn't get paid for any of this. It is their heart to do this, and we are giving it out for free. But I ask one thing from you all, and if you are watching this later on during this month, from now until December 31st, we are doing our fundraising campaign to help Compass, to support Compass, to help missionaries and their families get healing, restoration, training, and and the help and support that they need in order to thrive in the field and to come back home. I hope you've benefited from all these workshops. And again, I want to appeal to you all. I know your time and resources are very limited. So just consider Compass Ministries and your donation to help us continue the work that we've been doing. We have a vision for a member care center, a missionary care center here in Tampa, Florida. We have currently a house for women missionary kids right here in the Tampa Bay area, helping helping disciple young missionary kids, women that are coming back or coming to the United States, 18 and above. We provide mental health counselors, vocational counselors and coaches, pastoral care, and training. We help them transition back here into the United States so that they can thrive and not be alone. We have our counseling center here. We provide debriefings, pastoral counseling, mental health counseling. We also provide pre-field training, mental health and emotional health pre-field training. And we provide filial therapy training and child play therapy for missionaries. And we want to provide all these services at the lowest cost possible or at no cost at all. So we depend on our community members, on you, and for those who have been helped by Compass to pay it forward to help other missionaries that are needing the support so that they can thrive in the calling that God has given them. So I want to thank you all for being with us all day today. It's been a privilege, and so we'll see you next time. God bless you all.